MLS kicks off next week, and today we are talking about prospects. Yes, young American or USMNT prospects that will be playing in MLS in 2025, specifically the top 10 that you need to be watching. What up, guys? I'm Pete Douthit, host of the 11 Yank Show. We talk about everything in the American soccer landscape, and today we're talking about MLS prospects. Now, if you're like me, you really only watch MLS for the USMNT prospects, and that is not an easy task because they're spread out over a lot of different teams, and you have to watch a ton of them. Now, that being said, I'm going to give you a tip. If you want to watch the team that has the most prospects on it, or that is the most interesting in terms of player development or prospect development, it is the Philadelphia Union. There are 2 prospects in this top 10 list today, but there are others such as Frankie Westfield or CJ Oni or David Vasquez or Marcus Anderson who will be on that Philly first team, but didn't quite make it to this top 10 prospects list. So if you're going to watch anybody this season for their USMNT prospects, it's the Philadelphia Union. Really the only team in MLS that is consistently delivering players right now. I mean, they already have the Aronson brothers and Mark McKenzie as some sort of, success story. They have both, all of them have reached, sort of decent levels so far. You could argue Nathan Harriel, but he's not really a USMNT level player. Austin Trusty did come through the Philadelphia Union Academy originally, but generally speaking, I think they've done a good job. But this next generation of prospects that they're bringing through is even more interesting to watch. Now, the second team that is not so much really developing players, but getting involved in what I call reclamation projects would be the Montreal Impact. We've seen them, we saw them do it with Georgi Mihailovic a couple years back. We saw them recently do it with Caden Clark. He seems to have settled in quite nicely there. And they recently signed Jalen Neal from the Galaxy and Brendan Craig, who was kind of homeless, another Philadelphia Union reject. He was a reject. The others were not. Might be kind of an interesting team to watch. I mean, there's George Campbell. I don't really think there's USMNT quality there. But yeah, Montreal would be the second. But anyway, let's dive into this prospect list. But before we do, don't forget to smash that like button. And if you're new, hit subscribe and tell me what you think of this video in the comments below. Oh, also, I forgot, Bet Online. Believe is the code if you want to check it out. Thanks to them for sponsoring this video. All right, so these are the players here that are not going to be in this prospects video because I don't really consider them prospects anymore in the sense that I'm defining them for the context of this video. Now, if you are even a casual USMNT fan or you are a regular watcher, viewer of this channel, you know who these guys are already. Quinn Sullivan, Diego Luna, Ben Kramaski, Brian Gutierrez, Jack McLean, and Caden Clark. And I didn't have room for him here, but Jalen Neal kind of falls into this category as well. All of these guys have senior USMNT caps or call-ups, and some of them even have goal contributions for the senior team. They're all still quite young in terms of being 20 or 21 years old, but they are not prospects in the sense that I want to define them for the sake of this video. I will still watch these guys and keep an eye on their progress for sure, particularly a player like Diego Luna, but they are not going to be in the prospects window. I'm choosing 20 and under for the prospects window, and hopefully some guys that are maybe a little bit more under the radar that maybe you haven't heard of or don't know too much about yet, who could be due for a breakout season in MLS in 2025. We're starting with Maximo Carrizo, who is currently captaining the under-17 team in their CONCACAF World Cup qualifying tournament. He is an attacking midfielder, American-Argentine dual national from NYCFC. He had 3 goals and 3 assists in MLS Next Pro last season and did score 1 goal for the senior team in the Open Cup. Now, this needs to be a year. It doesn't need to be, but if we are going to keep tracking him and saying this is a high ceiling prospect, he needs to start showing up in MLS. And I think one of the reasons why he didn't so much last year was he's still a little bit physically not fully developed. And I think that makes it tough for him to compete in a very physically aggressive position like central midfield. He reminds me a little bit of Richie Ledesma, very skillful player, good eye for a pass, sort of a typical creative 10 player, but maybe isn't so much a two-way player just yet. On top of that, he is competing with Santi Rodriguez and Maxi Morales in that NYCFC midfield. Now look, you rarely hear me accuse a player of not being athletic enough, but reality is MLS is still a very athletic league. It is still a very physical league, and that can hinder a young prospect who is trying to break through. It doesn't mean long-term their prospects are, dim, but it might make it more difficult for him to gain minutes, to earn minutes, and then thus use those minutes to show what he can do. So I'll be watching Maxi Carrizo. He is a very, very interesting player, certainly not your typical player that comes through the American development system. Although I will say that is changing, right? You look at, guys like, maybe a Paxton Aronson or Gio Reyna, who didn't, Gio didn't fully come through, the American development system, but creative attacking midfielders. Anyways, it's going to be up to Maxi Carrizo to show this year that he can at least get significant minutes off the bench and be a threat. And I think if he gets at least 1,000 minutes in MLS and, gets 5 goal contributions, which might even be a lot, 3 to 5 goal contributions, I will consider it a step in the right direction. He does turn 17 next month, and I will say anything above that is a bonus, but definitely somebody to watch. Staying in New York, we have Julian Hall of the New York Red Bulls. And by the way, guys, these are not in any particular order. This top 10 is just the 10 I will be watching. I'm not doing 10 to 1 or 1 to 10, so don't worry too much about the order of the players. Julian Hall is a center forward / winger. He can play both. He was 16 years old, sort of started to break out a little bit last season for the Red Bulls, but was sort of blocked by Dante Van Zier. Dante Van Zier has now left the Red Bulls, and they have replaced him with Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting, who will be the starting 9, but does turn 36 next month, so may not be able to start every single game, particularly as we get into the dog days of summer, and the travel, could play, a big part in, him needing some rest. Now, Julian Hall had 6 goals and 1 assist in MLS Next Pro, 2 goals and 1 assist in MLS last season towards the end, but didn't really get on the field for the playoffs, so he's going to be wanting to make a step forward. He could play on the wing as well. Remember, Emil Forsberg is still there, but he is also aging and has certainly, even last season, I would say, was somewhat in decline. And so Julian Hall needs to seize that opportunity to try to get, I want to say, at least 1,000 to 1,500 minutes, and his goal should be to get, 7 to 10 goal contributions, because I think this is a high ceiling player. He reminds me a little bit of Folarin Balogun in terms of being a very quick, technical center forward whose pace and ability on the ball also allows him to play wide. So we'll see how much time he gets. A lot of that is down to him, of course, and how much he can push into this Red Bulls lineup, but he's one of the players I am more excited to watch. Now, he might just be 17 years old, but Peyton Miller already broke through at the New England Revolution last season, even getting 2 assists. He played 925 minutes, and he is such a raw left back. He can also play right back, of course, but he's a guy who you think, sort of broke through in MLS at the same age as Caleb Wiley, and also it's sort of a similar profile, very athletic player, technically has the foundation, but doesn't always use his technique well. Sometimes relies too heavily on, his athletic abilities. So I want to see him more in combination in tight spaces this season. I want to see him use that ability in order to become more effective down the left, and also defensively. He needs to continue to work. Positioning needs work, but this is a very high ceiling left back. He plays as a winger, by the way, for the senior team. The under 20 team. So he plays as a winger, which I don't think is his best position, although in his youth days he was a winger, and I think that is what has contributed a little bit to his lack of awareness defensively. But if you're going to become a full-time left back, which I think is probably his long-term position, he's going to have to work on that. But I expect him to be a locked-in starter for the Revolution this year and to take real steps forward in terms of his growth and potential as a player. Because if he does, and we don't get Nathaniel Brown, it's not unrealistic to think that this kid could make a USMNT senior debut this year if he continues to grow and progress. Of course, we're all hoping we get Nini Brown, but we will see what happens with that. Cavan Sullivan is probably the most hyped, exciting player to watch in this year's MLS 2025. He is still just 15 years old. He doesn't turn 16 until September. He had 5 goals and 4 assists in MLS Next Pro last year. It was sort of a breakout year for him in MLS Next Pro, which is still impressive for a 15-year-old. The big question for him is going to be, how does he look in MLS? He is not by any means going to be a starter, certainly not to start the season in MLS, but he will probably get minutes off the bench. I imagine he's probably going to alternate between the senior team and the MLS Next Pro team, depending on what his needs are. And that's going to be up to new Union coach Bradley Carnell to figure out, is how to get the best out of Cavan Sullivan, who is still growing. He is still in high school, right? He is still growing into his body and developing as a player, so we'll see what he looks like. I mean, look, 1,000 minutes and 5 goal contributions in MLS would be an amazing year for a 15-year-old who doesn't turn 16 until September. And he could be, the best or one of the best players in that under-17 World Cup later this fall, because that is how good this player is. Now, I am not as hyped on him as some people are, but he is so young that it's just impossible to know what this guy's ceiling is. And, when I said that in the past, somebody said to me, well, Pete, Manchester City bought him, so he must be good. Manchester City bought Alex Alcala. I wouldn't read too much into the Man City thing. And, from what I've heard, the fee was about $2 million. So it wasn't exactly like they splashed out on him. I'm not trying to, shit on the player too much. I'm just saying, we should pump the brakes. We should watch him. He is still extremely young. He's one for the future. For that probably that 2030 cycle from 26 to 30 is where we will see him. But I'm very curious to see how much he plays in MLS this year and how effective he is at that level. Reed Baker-Whiting. I know that TAC likes to talk about Weston McKennie as the American James Milner, which is fair. But there is an MLS James Milner, and his name is Reed Baker-Whiting. Last year for Seattle, he played left back, right back, winger, central midfield, but he did ratchet up a lot of minutes with 1,156 minutes for the Sounders. The key for him, he's a very athletic player. I really like him, and I think he sort of slides under the radar a fair bit, and I'm not sure why when we talk about young prospects, because he is still just 19, and he did break through with the Sounders quite early. I think what's hurting him is his ability to play multiple positions. Even though that is a really good education for a young player, I think that success for him this season will be nailing down one position, whatever it is, whether it's left back or right back or left wing, whatever it is. I want to see him nail it down and then continue to grow and be effective there, because he is a very good prospect and is, still with the under 20s and may even factor into that under 20 World Cup later this year, competing perhaps with Aiden Harangi at right back. But he's a good player. I want to see what he looks like for Seattle, and I'm sure some Seattle fans in the comments can chime in with their thoughts about him. Neil Pierre is probably the player in this entire top 10 that will get the least amount of minutes, because he is still very young, right? He just signed a homegrown contract with the Union. He's 17 years old. He was far and away the best center back in MLS Next Pro last season. I watched a lot of the Union 2 team because I was watching Cavan, and Neil Pierre always stood out to me. This guy has all of the tools, okay? He is an incredible passer of the ball, but it's not just his technical ability on the ball that makes him a good it's his vision. He's got incredible vision, particularly when it comes to the long-range pass. He is extremely athletic on both sides of the ball. He is a guy that's very quick on the turn, which you want, particularly if you're playing a high line, which I think the Union will this year. Bradley Carnell loves to press. And that is sort of the Union DNA anyways. They were still playing that way under Jim Curtin. But when you play a high line, there's two things that you need. You need to get pressure on the ball so that the opponent can't play balls in behind. But you also need center backs who are very quick, and not just quick with straight line speed, very quick to accelerate on the turn. And that is something that Neil Pierre always impressed me with. His ability to accelerate on the turn. And that cannot just be on the turn, going forward to intercept balls into midfield, which he does quite well too. Now, usually when you talk about young center backs, you're like, usually their weakness is their reading of the game. And I will say, Neil Pierre, I was actually very impressed with his reading of the game. He has a real calmness to him, and his decision-making process never looks frenetic. He has an ability to get to the right place at the right time. And I'm hoping that he gets some minutes with the Union this year. Now, he is going to be fighting Glavinovic and Macanya for a spot next to Jacob Glesnes. Now, they did let their other center back go to the Chicago Fire, so there is a pathway to minutes for Neil Pierre. He'll probably be on the bench to start the season, and my guess is if he gets 500 minutes, that's probably a success. I would like more, and I would really like to see what he looks like in MLS, because even though he's young, guys, I think he's ready. And I hope the Union treat him the way that Augsburg treat Noah Kai Banks, where, yeah, maybe he's raw and maybe there's still work to do, but maybe in a game where you're 3-0 up, you bring him on for the last 15 minutes to give him that experience and to, build up his confidence and his ability to understand the game, and his learning curve can be quicker. I hope that's how the Union treat him. I have not been impressed with how they treated Brendan Craig, and that is, an outlier for them, because generally they are very good with their prospects. But I'm really hoping that Carnell and the Union see a spot for Neil Pierre and give him the freedom to grow. Obviously they want to make the playoffs, but let's be honest, we know everybody makes the playoffs in MLS pretty much, and I just hope they give him the time to grow. Matthew Corcoran just signed with Nashville SC from Birmingham Legion. He came out of the formerly good FC Dallas Academy, which has sort of dried up in recent years. Ever since Ricardo Pepi, we really haven't seen anyone coming out of there. But he just signed with Nashville SC, who have been notoriously bad about developing players. Now that BJ Callahan is there, he seems to see a future with this kid. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I have heard a lot of very good things about Corcoran from people that I trust. They say he's a very good technical player, sort of a deep-lying distributor, not really a 6, more of an 8, probably similar to Jack McGlynn. I have not watched him play, so I don't want to rubber stamp this opinion, but people that I trust have and are very, very high on this kid. How many minutes will he get at Nashville? I honestly have no idea. But if he does start getting minutes, he's definitely one to watch, because I have heard glowing reports about this kid. He's also unusual, where he went down to USL and played there for 2 years to develop, which is something similar to what Tyler Adams did before he went with the New York Red Bulls senior team. And, look where that ended him at. I'm not saying this kid is Tyler Adams, but it is an option for some 16-year-old kids, which frankly, there are some kids like Neil Pierre who might be better off actually going to USL on loan instead of playing in MLS Next Pro, because it's more of an academy league at this point. But that is a discussion for another time. Nikos Sakiris. Now, it feels weird to say that he needs to have sort of a make or break season, because he is still just 19 years old. But it also feels like he's been around the block, and he's sort of been around for a while. I was very, very high on Sakiris when he broke through at the end of the 2022 season, particularly the game where he faced Seattle Sounders. This kid looked unplayable. He is the son of Sean Sakiris, former USMNT youth coach. But then Nikos Sakiris, in the last 2 seasons, in 23 and 24, started the season injured, and really took a long time when he came back from those injuries to find form again and to get fit and to start looking like the player that impressed me so much in late 2022. And I still haven't really seen that player yet. Now, he is still just 19 years old, so I don't want to write him off, but it's kind of at a point where, are you going to be what we thought you are? Maybe, maybe not. But if you are, maybe this is the season where you're going to have to show it. He is probably going to play as an 8, although I think he's more of a 10. I really like his left foot. I like his vision. I like his, he's a very rare combination of an incredible athlete and also a supreme technician. but I need to see that again. I've seen it there before, and I want to see that from Nico Sakidis this season. I hope we do. Christopher Brady, the 20-year-old Chicago Fire goalkeeper who doesn't really ever get talked about, much in terms of goalkeeping prospects. And I think some of that is that he also plays at Chicago, which is just, a goals-leaking machine. Chris Brady is a very good shot stopper, and he has played now for 2 seasons in Chicago as the starter. Where he struggles, really struggles, is with his feet. And now that Greg Berhalter is in Chicago, say what you want about Greg Berhalter's system, and I have said many things and will continue to, but at least he will get reps with his feet because Berhalter likes to play out of the back. Now, I was watching a video in Chicago training recently, and they were just having Chris Brady sort of run through the sticks and do very short, simple passes to the coach, 5-yard passes, 1-2 touch passing. And even then, he just looked very awkward with the ball. It is a problem that we have with young goalkeepers in the U.S. is that they specialize too early and they don't develop a solid enough technical foundation to be competitive with international goalkeepers with their feet. It's why Diego Cochin is the future because, he was developed outside of the U.S. We have traditionally created great shot stoppers, although now that's, in question too, but they can't play with their feet. And Chris Brady is no exception. Now, he's still just 20, which is young for a goalkeeper, so I don't think he's ever going to become Ederson or anything, but can he improve with his feet? And look, some people are going to say, Pete, I watched him play for Chicago all of last year and the year before. He can play with his feet. Yes, he can play with his feet when he's not under pressure. But when he plays the Philadelphia Union and they're pressing high up the field, can he ping passes accurately under pressure? That's going to be where he needs to grow. And then also decision-making, reading of the game, all of these things that young goalkeepers still sometimes struggle with. And that's fine. That worries me less because that can come with experience. I more want to see him and Berhalter really double down on him playing with his feet because that is probably his best way to break into the USMNT goalkeeping pool. Noah Cobb of Atlanta United at 19 years old played 1,500 minutes for Atlanta United last year. And, sometimes he was shaky. Sometimes good, sometimes not. He was inconsistent because he was an 18-year-old center back, and that's okay. But for his age, to be even getting minutes in MLS is quite impressive. I don't think Noah Cobb has the skill set to ever be an elite center back one day, but certainly to be getting minutes in MLS at his age is quite impressive, and he's definitely one to keep an eye on. Certainly for that U20 World Cup as well. There are, 3 or 4 other center backs that he's going to be competing with for minutes. So I don't know how much he's going to play this year. Atlanta still seems like a little bit all over the place. But if you do, turn on an Atlanta game, keep an eye on Noah Cobb because as far as our young center back prospects go, I don't think he always gets the credit that he deserves for, getting pro minutes at, the age that he has. All right, guys, those are my top 10 prospects. I'm sure I have missed someone that you're very excited about, okay? Maybe you're a Charlotte fan and you're excited about Nimfasha Berchimas. Or maybe you're a Galaxy fan and you're excited about, Ruben Ramos Jr. I don't know, but, maybe you're a Dallas fan and Nolan Norris is your guy. There are others. These were just my specific top 10 to watch. It doesn't mean that your other guy I'm ignoring or I have a vendetta against him or whatever. It just means I could only put 10, so not everybody made the cut. But put me in the comments. Maybe I missed somebody that you know. So put them in the comments, tell me, and I'll try to keep an eye on them if I'm watching. As always, thanks again for watching. We appreciate it. Thank you, and big shout out to all the Patreon supporters, especially everybody who's joined recently. I cannot tell you how much it means to me. Thank you all. Also, don't forget, I'm going to be joining TAC's team in the TST tournament this June as an assistant coach. Boy, is that going to be fun. We made the announcement just yesterday. Guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Sunday for the top 10. Talk to you soon.